Okay, so actually I created content for this TypeScript. So basic features which we need to learn for Angular, right? So I just created content. I'm sharing my screen.
Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so TypeScript is it's not a independent programming language. Okay, basically TypeScript is developed on top of JavaScript. So internally it uses JavaScript, and whenever you write a TypeScript program, you have to compile it so that it will generate the JavaScript, and that JavaScript you can run in the browser. Okay, you cannot run TypeScript directly in the browser. So whenever you are going to run any TypeScript program, it has to be converted to JavaScript. So this is the second point it says. So this process is called transpilation. So basically, instead of compiling, it will transpile. So the difference between compilation and transpilation is compilation is basically it will the compiler will convert the code to binary format like zeros and ones. But here the transpilation meaning translation. It's like converting from one language to another language. So like from TypeScript to JavaScript, right? So that's why it is called a transpilation. So TypeScript is transferred to JavaScript before being used in anywhere. And because it is developed on top of JavaScript, it will understand JavaScript. Even if you write JavaScript code in a TypeScript file and try to run it or like try to transpile it, it will work. Because basically, if there is any TypeScript syntax, it will find it and it will convert to the JavaScript. But if it JavaScript is there already, then it will not do any conversion. Just it will just create JavaScript file as is. Okay. So basically, even if you are using TypeScript program, but you can use JavaScript also. Okay. So just follow the steps so that you can install TypeScript in your local. Normally, when you install Angular, TypeScript will come with it, but let's create another environment for this. Like create another folder and then open terminal in that folder.
Okay.
Then we can run this command so that the TypeScript will get installed there. Okay, I'll do it first. Okay, then you can follow. Documents. Angular project text. Okay, let me create one folder. Type script. Okay. Open in terminal. Okay. And then run npm install TypeScript save dev. Okay. Okay. TypeScript is installed now. You see, basically it will install any node related packages or the Angular related package or JavaScript related stuff, right? When you do with a npm command, when you install with the npm command, basically it will create a node modules folder, and inside it will install that package. So I install TypeScript here. Here I can see TypeScript folder populated, and internally it will have all the TypeScript related code. Okay. Okay. Now, so did you guys follow this step?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let me create one. What is this? Please move this window away from the shared application. Okay, let me open one notepad. Okay, let me write something here. Console.log. Let me print something. Hello world. Okay, and let me save this file as ts. So okay, you're not able to see my screen, right? Except the.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Sorry, let me stop it.
Yeah.
So yeah, share screen. Now you can see my notepad, right?
Yeah. I can see.
Okay, okay. So what I did is I just opened Notepad++ and I wrote this line.
Okay.
Console.log hello world. Basically, what I'm doing is console is a object in JavaScript. Okay, so because it has JavaScript has this object, even TypeScript also supports it. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to print hello world using the TypeScript program. Okay. So normally in the browser also, even in our Angular also, right? To print anything in the console, we have to use this statement for debugging purpose. Okay. So we'll use it regularly once we start actual project. Okay. Let me save this file. And yeah, in here, let me save it as test.ts. TS stands for TypeScript.
Okay.
So all TypeScripts will have the extension as TS. Okay, let me save it here. And then open the command prompt. Now, after we install the TypeScript, right, we didn't verify whether it is installed or not. So type tsc-version. Okay, so if you run TypeScript directly, it is giving some error, right? So due to some permissions issue, it's not executing. But you can use the npx command before TypeScript. Okay, npx stands for Node Package Executor. Okay, basically this will run the TypeScript command, and by skipping the Windows part, like it will not. We don't need to use this authorization. Okay, if you run directly, it will think that some unauthorized program is running. But if we use npx, then it will not think like that. It will bypass this thing. So I can see version 4.73 is installed. Did you guys also execute this command?
It says says like command not found for me.
npx command is not found.
1 second. I will do it again. Yeah, it says like version 4.7.3.
Okay.
Yeah.
For both, right?
Yeah, for me it's working.
Okay, cool. So now we have the TSC. This is the transpiler. Okay. I forgot to mention this is the transpiler.
Okay.
Now we wrote a single line code and we saved it as a TS file. Let me run that file. npx tsc and test. Yeah, test.ts. It ran actually, but nothing got printed here except this warning. This is unrelated. Okay. But if you go to the folder, hopefully there is a JavaScript. Yeah, JavaScript file is generated here. Let me open this file and see what is the content of this file. See, the same thing is there, right?
Yeah.
In the test.ts, we have same one line. Here also we have same. Basically, because this is a JavaScript statement, when it transpiled to JavaScript, it stays same. It will not change, right? So that's the reason we are seeing the same same code. Okay. Now to
We
execute
have to
this
do this
JavaScript
only in the notepad or like we can do this
anywhere text editing supports.
okay.
You can do it in the Visual
Visual.
Studio Code also, but I have this project running, so that's why I didn't open. But let's do that also. Like I just wanted to show that anywhere you can edit, create or write codes, be it Angular or be it TypeScript or JavaScript. The only thing is, if you use Visual Code Studio, Visual Studio Code, we'll have more advantages like syntax highlighting, right? The syntax is highlighted, and like we can see a list of files here. But in Notepad++, we cannot see list of files, and we have terminal access here. And the same way, you can find something if you want to search across the code. So all these features will not be available in basic text editors. Okay. The only reason we use this enhanced editors because we have more features here. Such can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, and now I think we can hear you.
Okay. You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Actually, a couple of minutes back, I was talking and I think there was no response. I think you guys couldn't hear me.
No,
Yeah.
we didn't hear
No.
that. Okay, maybe
Yeah.
it was due to some glitch or something. Okay, what was that you're saying?
No, I was telling about that TSC -v. That for me, that command worked directly. I said. I was
Oh,
telling
this
about
one?
that. Yeah.
Okay, fine. It doesn't matter. Like if it is working, then fine. If it
Yeah.
is not working, we can use this npx as a proxy. Okay.
Okay.
So now we generated the JavaScript file. Right? Now let's run the JavaScript file. Node. And if you are running JavaScript out of browser anywhere else, you have to use Node. Okay. Test.js. See, the hello world is printed. Okay. So now what we did, we wrote a TypeScript file and we transpiled into a JavaScript file using the tsc command, and then we ran the JavaScript file and it got executed. So now let's go step by step of this documentation. And I'm still not completed this documentation at full. I'll be doing all this HTML and TypeScript. Angular, Git, and CSS. All the documents I'll develop here, and then I'll push it to some domain. Okay, I'll share the link with you guys so that it will be referred later anytime. Okay, so we did this, and we ran the JavaScript, and then from this section onwards, we'll be running actual TypeScript code. Okay, so let's define one variable. Okay, let me open the same TS file. Okay, let me define one variable. It is called student name, and let me print that student name. Okay. Oh, sorry, this is JavaScript. Yeah, this is TS file. Okay. Now let me save the TS file and go to command line, and let me do the transpilation again. Okay, transpilation is done. The file is changed actually. Let me refresh it. Okay, you see the difference between this and this is the constant type changed to variable var.
Yeah.
Okay, so here the constant is this keyword belongs to TypeScript actually, and this internally changed to var. And now if you run this code with node, it will print the John Doe. Okay. So there are three ways of defining a variable in TypeScript. One is using the constant keyword, and second one is with a variable. As I said, if we are we are running we are let's say writing code in TypeScript, it will internally support JavaScript also, right? So anything which is already supported by JavaScript will be supported in TypeScript files also. That's the reason you can define any variable with the variable also, var. Okay, and the third category is let category. So let keyword. So with the let keyword also you can define, and there is small differences. I'll just mention the differences once we run all these types of keywords. Let me open the TS file. And student name. Okay. You cannot define same variable name. Okay, and that's why I'm changing it to 3. Oh, sorry, 1, 2. Okay. Now let me do the transpilation again. tsc test.ts. Okay, let me go here. The file changed again. Now we can see all changed to variable because JavaScript support only variable, not the other types. But TypeScript is developed on top of JavaScript, right? So it will have its own keywords. But at the end, they will be transpiled to whatever supported by JavaScript. Okay. Now, if we run, it will print the same value. Okay. So you are doing these steps, right?
Yeah.
No, actually, I'm following you. I'm not doing it.
Okay, fine. Anyhow, I'll share this document, right? Anyhow, I'm also recording this session, right? You can basically follow
Okay.
later also. So now the differences between these three types is, if you define a variable as constant, then you can assign value only once. Okay. After that, if you try to assign the student name with some other value, it will not accept. Okay. So that is what I mentioned here. Their value cannot be changed, neither they can be redeclared. You cannot redeclare the same constant name again in that class or that page, and you cannot reassign any other value to it. It can be initialized only once. Okay. And the second one is with where basically it is JavaScript keyword. It is it's a generic thing. Basically, you can assign any value to it, and you can assign one another thing is, if you define variable, let's say line number 2, then you can basically print that value in line number 1 itself. That is the weird thing JavaScript does with the variable, this where keyword. So meaning, let's say I define variable here in the third line. Let me remove this code. So normally any other programming language, this is not valid, because we are printing a variable which is not yet available till this line. So only at line number 3 this value is created, or that variable is created, and after that we can use that variable, but not before that. But in JavaScript, if you define any variable with this var keyword, you can do that. This will valid in the browser. So here what will happen, it will print undefined. Here it will print John Doe. Okay, that is the difference. And to avoid that, they introduce the let keyword in the TypeScript. So let keyword, what it does is, if you define any variable with the let, here it will throw the error that student 1 is not defined yet. Okay, now this is valid. So that's the reason they have these three types of declaration of variables. Okay, and after that, in JavaScript we have only one type, like no, not one type, three types of variables, like string, number, and boolean. So you can define variable like this, and you can assign any value. Here I assign string, right? John Doe is a string, but I can assign same variable with boolean value also, true or false, or I can assign this with some number also. So all these things are valid in JavaScript. So that is weird actually. So it will be difficult to identify at runtime which type of field is a particular field. So to avoid that, they actually introduced this typing. TypeScript is nothing but basically the types are supported here. In JavaScript, types are not supported. Basically supported, but only with variable keyword you can define any type of value, like be it number or boolean or text or string, anything. But here there are strict rules in TypeScript. So you can mention, while defining a variable, you can mention what type of value it will allow. So that is a main advantage of TypeScript. And the main difference of TypeScript and JavaScript is that you can mention, or you can basically assign a type. In the TypeScript name itself, there's type, right? So you can assign a type while defining a variable. Okay, basically it support types. That's the reason they name it as TypeScript. So now in TypeScript, you define, let me change this to let. So this is a string. This is a Boolean. So the syntax of defining type is, after the variable name, use your colon key, and then the type, actual type keyword. Okay.
Okay.
Number. So now this is valid. Let me print is done. Save it. Let me transpile it. It printed true.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is how we define types. Okay, let's see what TypeScript generated JavaScript here. See, it changed to variable. So we did not. It actually removed the type definition, right? The type definition we gave here, the Boolean string number. In the JavaScript, those are not supported. That's the reason it is removed. Okay, and there is a Boolean, and the other type is number. So number can support all these types of values, like basic number, and then hexadecimal numbers, and binary numbers, and octal numbers, and big int, like if a value like bigger than certain number, right? We have like in Java and C, we have some 6-digit number we can store in integer, but if any number crosses 6 digits, then I think we have to use a long, and after long there is something called big integer recently came. So these values will be used to store big values, the same way big int also here. Okay.
Mhm.
And basically all these things, right, we will not use in our day-to-day programming or day-to-day feature development. Okay, basically we'll be using only this type, Boolean type, and the very important thing is string type. Okay. In TypeScript, like both are valid. You can define a value here or the type here and then assign a value, or if you are assigning a value directly while defining the variable itself, you can remove this, because TypeScript will identify the right side value. If it is in double quotes, it will basically assign string type here to the color. Okay, and if you are assigning here directly, you can remove this. Only this will be useful when you declare it first and then use it later. Let's say, okay, you defined this value here, and let me remove this. But later somewhere in the code, you want to assign student name with value. Okay. So this is allowed because you defined a string and you assigning a string, right? So it is valid. But if you defined it as a string and trying to assign some number, then it will not take. It will say you defined as a string, but as trying to assign a number, so it will throw an error. See, it is complaining. Type number is not assignable to type string. And after string, there is array. Basically, array is list of values, right? List of this typed values. So if you define a number as a type of this array, then you can only store array numbers in it. If you define string here, then only you can store strings. Okay, basically to whole list of values, we use arrays. And there is one more type is called tuple. This is basically not supported in JavaScript, but here in TypeScript it is supported. So you define a variable with this specific syntax. In braces, you can define any number of values: string, number, number, string, something like that. But when you are assigning also, you have to basically assign same number of values. So you define string here, the first one must be string. You define number here, the second one must be number. So this will work. But if you try to assign number to the string and string to the number, it will fail. Okay.
So it's like an array tuple.
Yeah, it's like no, it's not like array. Tuple is something like a row in the database. Because a row in the database, we'll have each column is a different type, right? One is a varchar and one is integer, one is
Okay.
date, something like that, right? So basically it will store, let's say if we take student example, student has name, marks, and DOB, date of birth, and what else, gender, right? So these are different types of data, not common data, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
that entire information you can store it in a tuple. Tuple
Okay.
is basically we can use row or record or tuple as a interchangeable words.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, we will not use this also when we actually start coding. Okay.
Okay.
This is just for our knowledge. Okay. And you can access any specific tuple value with that specific index, just like arrays.
Okay.
Okay. So because it is a string, you are able to use substring method. And because it's a number, you cannot use substring here. It will fail.
Okay.
Okay. So the same way, if you try to access any variable out of defined tuple value, then it will throw error because we don't have 3, right? We have 1, 2. That's it. But we 0, 1. Sorry, 0, 1, just like array. And you're trying to access the third index. There is no third index here. We have only 2 values. So that's the reason it will throw. We are accessing a value out of the index. And this will be the main another important feature we'll be using in our day-to-day Angular coding. This is enum. Enum is basically list of values defined in a like closed syntax. Something like if I say color, and I can have list of colors here, then I can use this reference to refer any of these values defined. So this will be useful in our day-to-day coding in cases such as, let's say, I have a, let's take the student example, and we define student past status as like passed or failed, right? So that 2 values we can define here, like student status as name, we can give student status as name here, and then we can say passed is one value and failed is another value. So and we can basically access that status, this reference, in some conditions. Let's say if he's passed, then basically give him some certificate, or if he's failed, then give him failed certificate. So those kind of decision making, the if else conditions, right? So we can use this enum. You can basically hard code also, like if student status equals to in string failed or passed, but that is not a good programming. So in order to write a clean maintainable code, we have to move all the hard coded string to enums. Okay. So basically when you define an enum, it will assign numbers. For first one, it will assign 0, second one, it will assign 1, 2, so on. So if you want to change that, you can basically assign a number to first one, and from there it will keep on incrementing. Like here you assign 1, it will assign 2 and 3 to the blue, okay, and so on. Or you have freedom to assign any value also, like any number also. It doesn't matter. It need not be a sequential value. You can assign any value, random values also. Okay. So this is one important thing. Anyhow, we'll be covering this while we are go into the Angular part. Okay. And there is one more thing called any type. Basically, in JavaScript we don't have this type, but if you define any, we can assign any value, any type of value. Like you can assign number, you can assign string, or you can assign anything. So this is like, global type. You can assign any value to it. Basically, most of the programmers, right, who are working on Angular, they won't basically define string or number. They'll just do any, because it will work anyhow. It will not throw any errors. Just to finish the work early, they just do this. But it's not recommended. Okay. Basically, we should define a variable type specifically for each value. We can do this example also. So even for any also, you just used where, because there is no other type is supported in JavaScript, right? So at the end, it will come to variable, the default one. And there is one more type is called void. This void will be used only, like I just defined this thing, but this is not a, this will like as per TypeScript, this is a valid syntax, but we will not use anywhere this one, because who will assign undefined to variable and then use it somewhere in the code, right? So this scenario will not come anywhere. But void will be useful only when you are trying to write functions. In function, basically when you are returning some value, that return value must be mentioned here. If you are returning Boolean, then you must mention Boolean here. If you are not returning any value like this, yeah, I'm not returning anything back, right? So I can mention void here. So only in these cases void will be used, like if functions not returning any value. But other cases will not use this void type. Okay. And we can let me run this also. So in the JavaScript, we will not have any return type value here. You can return any value. It will not complain. You can return string, or you can return number, you can return any type, you can return even another type of class also, but it will not complain. So, but in TypeScript, we can mention this cleanly, like only this method returns void, meaning nothing. But in JavaScript, it will not support that syntax. That's why the transpiler will remove that keyword, and it will convert to the only JavaScript understandable format. Let me change this to string. Okay. And then let me return some value here. Return. Hello. Let's see what it will do. It removed the return part, but it kept the return state because that syntax is not supported here. And we have two values basically to represent null or undefined values. Let's say if you define some variable, but you did not assign any value, then it will be by default assigned as undefined. Or if you define some value and if you want to assign null, you can assign. Basically, null means nothing. It is not initialized yet. Okay. So this will be useful only in cases where some data is not coming and we want to check null checks or like if value is defined or undefined. So basically it will be useful in some conditions like if else conditions. Okay. And the other main topic of TypeScript is classes. Okay. One is the types, this primitive types. Okay. And the second important topic is classes. So normally, like you already worked on JavaScript, right? You both. Did you work on any other programming languages?
Yeah, Java.
No, I worked on JavaScript only, not on the languages.
Okay. So if you have any experience in like Java or any .NET or any other programming languages, right? A class is the basic type in other programming languages which support OOPS concepts like object oriented, right? So basically class is like you can define any real-time objects or real-time things. You can represent real-time things with a class in programming language. For example, let's say I can say a class of type student. Okay, a student will have properties like name. You can have another property like gender. You can make it a string and class name. Okay. So something like this. So now if you are going to use somewhere, let's say if student is entering this data or some data entry operator entering this data from some user interface, basically you can assign that entire data to these three variables, like these variables, whatever you can define here. Okay. And then basically you can store this in the database as is the entire object. Okay. So this is the advantage. So we can use this object as a carrier of real-time objects, like real-time things outside, right? You can define anything here. You can define like a department, and department properties will come here. Okay, and you can create another class as manager, and this manager will have a department, right? Department, and this is of type department and his name and some other parameters. Okay, basically the real-time relations, right? Like outside programming or outside computer world, what we have is real-time, right? So real-time problems or real-time relations or real-time things you can represent using these classes. Okay, class is a template of outside real-time thing. Okay, and we'll be using these classes a lot in Angular. Let me open one project here. Okay, if you go to any component, that component is of type class, right? So there are a couple of things in classes, what they'll support, what they'll not support, right? Basically, any class will have fields. These are called fields or properties. Okay, point has two variables, x, y, and both of type number. And later, anywhere in the code, you can define, you can create a new point or new object, and then you can just refer these variables directly. Point dot x. Point is the variable reference, and you're referring x of this one, and referring y. Okay, you're assigning a value 0 here directly. The same way we can basically, as I was saying, right, the student example also, we can basically create a new student object in later in the code, and we can basically use these fields. And we covered this part, right? So basically I defined x with the type number, but if you're assigning a value, you don't have to define explicitly that this is a number. Typescript will internally know that you are assigning number means by default this variable is number, so internally it will map that number type to it. And another important topic about classes is each class will have a method called constructor. So constructor is a entry point to any class. So let's take this class. Okay. Now let me compile it, but nothing will happen. Let me transpile. Nothing will happen. Even if I try to execute that class also, nothing will happen because it didn't do anything. Just executed, but it didn't do anything. Reason is we defined a class, but now we are not using it. If you use somewhere here, then it will do something, but we are not doing anything, right? So it just executed. But the important or interesting part is JavaScript will not support classes. Okay, JavaScript will not support classes. So whatever class syntax I wrote here cleanly, that is transpiled to a JavaScript. In JavaScript, to create a class, you have to all these things. JavaScript will not support classes. It will support only variables, right? So it basically created a variable of type, variable of name point, and then it created a function with the name and then 2 parameters, and then it did all these things. The transpiler did all these things. But here in the Typescript, it is straightforward and simple. Okay, you can basically remove this also to simplify even more. Okay, yeah. So now to use this class, what we can do is let. So we can use the let operator, and then create a point. So point of type point equals to new point. Okay, when you say new and call that class, basically it will try to call this constructor. So this constructor takes 2 values, right? So we have to pass 2 values. Let me say 10 and 20. Okay. Now let me save it and let me transpile again. See, the first part is same as is, but the second point is it created the point object just like how we defined here, but only thing is it changed that let operator to variable. Now let me print console.log. Let me print this point. Point is this reference, okay? Dot x. So I'm trying to print this x. But when we created the object, we are passing 10, right, in place of x. So this should print 10. If you are printing y, that will refer this value. Okay, let us see the JavaScript part. Okay, it is straightforward. It is taking point reference and printing x and y. Let me execute this. See, it printed 10 and then 20. Okay. Any doubts? Like understanding the classes, because classes are very important thing.
No, I don't have.
Okay. Only thing is you have to practice these classes a bit more. Okay. And because the classes will be using in Angular directly without any other thing. And in classes we'll have few more concepts. So you can basically override or like overload the constructor. So it's not like you will have only one type of constructor. Okay. Basically we can have more constructors also. So the usage of those constructors are, let me create same constructor, but let me remove these values. This is called default constructor. If constructor does not have any values, then this is called default constructor. Okay, and we can remove this too. Let me print something here. Console.log default constructor code. So now this will call the first constructor. To call second constructor, we just remove these two. Okay, and let's print these two values. 0.1, because we cannot use the same reference here. 0.1.x, 0.1.y. So here, because we are not sending any values to it, and we are not assigning any values to x and y inside here. So what it will do is, it will just call this method when this line is executed, but after that it will try to access x and y, which are undefined. Multiple constructors are not allowed. Why? Is it because of we used it later? Interesting. Let me comment this. Let me remove this. Yeah. So we'll come to that part later. I think this is not supporting the multiple constructors, but normally in other programming languages also it will support. Maybe something different with the TypeScript. But okay, we defined a default constructor, and we are printing this, and then we are printing the X and Y, right? So whenever this is called, new and the object name and the parentheses or the constructor thing, basically this is directly pointing to the constructor. So if you're defining any class, or if you're creating any object like this, then basically the constructor will be called. If you're passing two arguments, it will try to find a two argument constructor. If it is passing no values, it will try to find a no value constructor. And this will be printed, right? So that's what happened here. The default constructor is called, that is printed here, and then it's trying to print X and Y, which is not yet defined. So that's why it is saying undefined. Okay, to make it print some value, we can do one thing. We can assign this dot X equal to 10, this dot Y equal to 20. Let me save, transpile. See, it printed 10 and 20 because we assign values here. So mostly constructors will be used to initialize these variables, be it from the outside or be it from the inside itself. Okay, if you are passing from here, just like in the previous case, then you are passing values from outside of the class and trying to initialize the fields inside the class. Okay, but if you are not passing any values, then you are initializing, then you must be initializing within the constructor itself. So you cannot initialize anywhere else, except you can assign some maybe here, like you can assign values here, 10 and 20. I can remove here. This is valid, it will work. But other than this place, or like when defining the fields itself or in the constructor, you cannot initialize these variables. Okay, like you cannot do this one. This is not valid. Okay, so we covered the constructor part, and then there are methods. Okay, a class is the capsule of variables and functionalities, or like methods. Okay, so variables are like fields, and methods where we can have a logic, like business logic. We can write some code in it. Okay, so let me remove this. Now I can write a method here, or function. So to call this one, the same as referring the variables, but call the method name, and it is expecting a variable n of type number. Let me send 2. Okay, okay, let me run this JavaScript file. is undefined. Why? Okay. It is basically if it returns some value, then that value will be printed, but it is returning void, right? So that is the reason it printed undefined. But let's assume that, okay, it will return some value, number, and return this dot x equals to okay. So what I did is I just assigned x with n plus n means whatever I'm passing here plus the number 10 here. So I'm assigning and basically overriding x by adding 2 and 10. So it printed 12. But if you say void here, it will not do anything. It will say void, but if you're trying to return some value, it will throw exception, saying that your return type is void, but you're trying to return. So we have to remove the return type. We don't have to do anything. Okay. And forward slash means comment. Okay, it will not be respected by the compiler. It will just ignore it. See, undefined. The same way you can have as many methods as possible. Only thing is just change the name. And same way you can have X number of variables also, but names must be different. But if you see the JavaScript, it will be a different level. It will be difficult to understand also. So with Angular, we don't have to worry about JavaScript. Okay, you can just ignore this, and we have to write any logic only in TypeScript. Okay. So now I think we covered most of the class syntaxes. Yeah, we covered classes. One more thing is we have access specifiers in classes. That means I can say this X is a private. It cannot be accessed outside. This Y is a public. So this is accessed by outside. This Z is protected. Okay. And this is default. Default is public. Now, if I try to print X, it will say, okay, let's see what it will say. It will say we cannot access X. See, property X is a private and only accessible within the class point. That means I can access that X here inside a class. Basically, I can return it. And I say X is a number, right? So number. Now let me say 0.1 dot scale. And let me remove this also because I'm not using it in the method. Just I'm calling scale, and the scale return the X value. See, now it returned 10, but earlier it said property X is private and only accessed within the class point. So that is another feature of classes. Like you can mention which fields are accessible outside of this class and which fields are not accessible outside of the class. Okay. So any questions so far for the class, because classes are important. And after classes, we have one more important thing, interfaces and decorators. These two are important. Okay, I'll be covering the those two topics tomorrow, along with these objects also, objects and functions. So far, any questions? And in TypeScript, there are like many, not many. It will take like 4 to 5 days if we cover properly. But those are not important features for us, because as far as Angular concerned, we need to define variables in classes, and we need to use these classes and enums also. And I think that's it. Only classes will be used. I'll be explaining this objects and these decorators, right? This is just to understand the syntax of a component, like why we have this. This is called decorator in TypeScript. Okay, why we have this, and why we have this, and why we have this. Okay, so now you already like let's take this component as example. So we did not cover this export so far, and we did not cover this decorator so far. We did not cover this one so far. Now we have covered all this, right? So we defined a class, we defined a constructor, we defined a method here, and which returns void type, and that's it. Right?
Yeah.
So when we cover like in next session, when we cover the inheritance and modules, and then the decorators. If we cover these three things, then you'll understand by looking at this. Okay, you'll understand everything, every single thing in this class. Okay. Okay. Tomorrow I'll try to finish the TypeScript part, and then we will go to HTML. I think you both already know HTML little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't have to go deeper into the HTML.
Yeah.
Okay, then good. So basically in HTML, I just curated a list of important tags. I think around 25 tags will come. If you know only those 25 tags, then you know the entire HTML. You don't have to learn anything, because HTML is like we'll be using only this span, div, paragraph, and image. These tags only, right? We'll not use anything else. Even tables also will have components, and those components are implemented using divs and spans only. And recently no one is using table also.
Yeah.
And no one is using this ordered unordered list. We might use this headers, but most of the things are like absolute, like nobody is using these tags. We need only around 10 to 15 tags you'll be using regularly. Other than that, HTML is nothing to learn. There's nothing to learn. Okay. And what about CSS? CSS, you both are confident?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then I think after TypeScript, I think we can directly jump into Angular, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can just send the document you created. We can just read once. I think that's enough.
Which document?
No, you just showed, no, that we can just check once, and I think
Yeah.
that's enough.
This one, the
The
TypeScript one.
showed now. Yeah. No, the HTML CSS also I said.
Acha, okay, this one. Okay, yeah, sure. I
Yeah,
still
I
haven't.
said we can just brush up and that's enough. I said for me it's
Okay.
enough. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So I'll be like, I'm like taking some time from my day job and just preparing this document.
Okay. Okay.
Only important tags and only important features in the TypeScript, because there are many features in the TypeScript which are not usable for us. So if you are learning Angular, only these features I listed here are important, and we'll be using these features only in Angular. Okay. So this TypeScript, HTML, and CSS also.
Okay.
Mainly, I'll be listing out like the margins and padding and alignments, positioning, all those things, only important things. And anyhow, we'll be using the Bootstrap, right? So we don't have to worry about actual like CSS syntax. If you go through the Bootstrap classes, we will know which component to make by using the Bootstrap classes, just by going to their site. Okay, and anyhow, TypeScript will be done. In Angular, I think it will take time because Angular content is little bigger. So as we finish each topic, I'll try to add this documentation here. Okay. I did not add anything else here. Just I'll like as we go, I'll try to add content here, and then I'll push this entire site to Firebase so that I can share the link and credentials. You can just log in and you can refer the content.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, if I'd recommend you to practice this TypeScript content we covered, but how can you get this document? Can I send this PDF version?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I can just do save. But this is not completed yet. Till classes I just finished. After that, interfaces, objects, I just used some dummy content. I did not cover. Okay, till at least classes you can just practice multiple times, and you can in Google, right? You can just search for TypeScript classes or any classes for that matter, like Java classes or .NET classes. You can read more about class, how to define a class and how to define fields, how to create a method inside it, and how can we call outside of that class, and private, public, protected, all these things, right? You can just go through it again. Just do not rely on this content because I just written brief statements. I did not written like complete stories of those keywords, right? Just go through in Google also, you'll get more idea. TypeScript PDF. Okay, I'm stopping my screen share. Let me stop the recording also.